internet friends, welcome back to Paradise Lost in Books. I'm Christy, and today I am here to talk to you about one of my favorite books of all time, A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J. Maas. I'm sure you've probably heard of this series, especially since the third and final book in the main trilogy just came out, but for those of you who maybe are newer to BookTube or the YA book community, let me give you a spoiler-free synopsis of this book. So this book is a Beauty and the Beast retelling that focuses around our heroine, Farah. Farah is living with her two sisters and her father in a cottage in the woods. They're very poor, and Farah has had to learn how to hunt to help her family survive. And one day she kills this giant wolf in the woods, and it turns out that that wolf was a fairy, and a very powerful fairy from the fairy lands, Prithian, comes to claim her to pay back her debt according to the treaty since she took the life of a fairy. So she gets taken to Prithian, and she quickly learns while she's there that the fairies aren't at all what she expected them to be. She also learns that there is a plague that is terrorizing the land of Prithian, and she may be the only one that can stop it. So when I did my, one of my first videos was my top 10 favorite books of all time, and I put the ACOTAR series at like number 4, but I think I need to bump it up to number 2 because this is a reread for me. This is the first book banter I've done with a book that I'm rereading, and I just love this series so much. Like, it's seriously just under Harry Potter for me, but I'm going to try not to give too many spoilers during the spoiler section for this book of the rest of the series because I have read the other 2 books. But if I do think I'm going to be giving away a spoiler, I'll make sure to say something, and that way if you've only read the first book or you haven't read all of the series, you won't get spoiled for things to come. But that's all I'm going to say for the non-spoilery section, so go away. If you haven't read the series yet, you really have to read it. This is a fantastic fantasy series, and I'm just really excited to talk about it. So go away, non-spoilery people. Bye. Okay, so I'm going to do this a little bit differently. Usually for my book banters, I do likes and dislikes and kind of just break it down into the things that I think are good about the book and the things that I think are bad. And I'll still do that, but I also kind of want to break it down into more specific sections because there's just so much about this book that I love and that I want to talk about. So first, I'm going to talk about the characters. Okay, first I want to talk about Farah, obviously our main character. At first I thought Farah was kind of boring. The first time I read the book, I was like, oh my god, Farah, stop whining about literally everything. God, she was just so hateful. And I mean, it's understandable because she's been through so much and she kind of got forced to take on the role of provider when she really didn't want to and shouldn't have been expected to. She's the youngest daughter in her family, but I liked her a lot better when I reread it because I knew where her story was going and I've seen her character development, and I think her character development is one of the best that I've seen in a series. She's in such a different place and she's such a different person at the beginning of ACOTAR than she is at the end of the series, even just at the end of the first book. And I just think it's wonderful to see such well-written character development. I also like that Farah is an artist. I feel like with a lot of YA heroines, we see that they're naturally skilled in some type of physical thing, like bow and arrows, or fighting, or magic, or whatever. But Farah's just like, I hunt because I have to, but what I really love to do is paint. And I just think that's really cool, and I've always loved that about her in this series. Let's talk about her sisters. I'm sorry, I've read the whole series, I've reread ACOTAR and ACOMAF, and I just never get around to liking Nesta. I understand Nesta, I respect Nesta in some ways, but I do not like Nesta, and I don't think I'm ever gonna like Nesta, even after finishing the third book. Sorry, Nesta, I'm just never gonna like you. I did think it was really cool that Nesta went to try and find Farah. I do wish that maybe we had gotten a little bit more about why she was able to resist the glamour that Tamlin put on the family, because it was just kind of like, oh, because she's so strong-willed, I guess. I just thought that was really great. That was like when I first was like, okay, Nesta, I still don't like you, but I can respect you as a person because her family loyalty runs deep, even if she's a very complex character. But it is nice to have a character that's kind of mean and assertive like that, because usually female characters at least have a softer side that we see, even if they are really aggressive, but Nesta really doesn't give that to anyone except Elaine. But even with Elaine, she's a little more reserved. We only really see an outpouring of emotion a couple of times with Nesta, and it always involves Elaine when it does. Okay, Lucien and Tamlin. Lucien just makes me think of like a weird mix between Cogsworth and Lumiere, like, especially since it's a Beauty and the Beast retelling. He's just kind of subtly like, oh, don't you think that ferrymen are handsome, Farah? Like, oh, Lucien, you're so adorable. He's just that sassy, token sassy character, and I just adore him. He's so funny. And Tamlin, let's talk about Tamlin. I'm gonna hold up my notebook because I'm gonna talk about spoilers, and I'll put the time that the spoiler goes away right here, so you know where to skip ahead to. I saw so many warning signs for Akamath things with Tamlin in this book. There's several times where he says things about wanting to protect her, wanting to keep her safe, wanting her to be there where he can see her. And it's so weird how the very first time you read this book, those things come off as being very romantic, and she really needed those things in the first book because she was the provider and the protector and the caretaker for so long, and no one ever took care of her. So you can really see where that overprotection is going to come into play in Akamath. But focusing more on his actual role in ACOTAR, I just loved them so much, especially the first time I read this book. I just thought that their relationship was well written, and you can really see a lot of Beauty and the Beast parallels in their story. For example, when he comes in from hunting the different evil fairies that are plaguing his land, and he's injured, and she tends to him and stuff, that's like directly out of Disney's Beauty and the Beast, where Belle is tending to his paw after he saves her. And their relationship kind of develops in much the same way. It's very tense at first, but she has more of a reason to be afraid of him. I mean, she's heard nothing but bad things about fairies her whole life, so of course she's very skeptical of him. I will say though that even with all of that, even the first time I read it, it really annoyed me that Tamlin didn't really try to help Farah in the end. I mean, Rhysand stood to lose a lot more, and he was a lot closer to Amarantha than Tamlin, and he still managed to get himself down there to help her. So, you know, Tamlin, the fact that he only ever tried to see her once, and then it was to physically be with her, really irked me, even the first time I read it. And that was the first time I kind of had like a irritation towards Tamlin. I was just like, really, dude? Like, you could have done more. Speaking of Rhysand, let's talk about him. I hated him so much the first time I read this book. Akamath spoiler time. I'll put the time for you to skip ahead to. Obviously, now that I've read the rest of the series, I love Rhysand. He's amazing and wonderful and a precious baby that I just adore, but I just felt like the first time I read this book, I thought he was so skeevy and creepy, and I thought it was really gross that he was making Farah do these things like getting drunk with him and sitting in his lap, and I get the purpose of it now, but I just was so skeezed out by that at first. Rhysand is also a great character for character development, and his powers are so cool, even though when he went into Farah's mind, that was when I was like, bruh, that is like a line you don't cross. Like, why would you ever do that? No, not okay. And I just hated him at first. I was just, ugh, creep. Along the same lines as talking about the characters, I kind of want to talk about the world as a whole. I like this series so much better than Throne of Glass. Like, especially once you read all 3 books, I think you can really see that this story was much more thought out than Throne of Glass, and it feels cohesive and fluid all the way through. Like, there was a story she was telling from the very beginning, whereas Throne of Glass feels a lot more like it's jumping around, and maybe she hadn't really figured out what she wanted to do with the story. I felt the world building was really great. Like, I love the courts and how it's all separated, and the different fairy realms and the small mortal lands, and I don't know, I just am in love with the world of Prithian. Okay, I'm going to talk about some of my favorite scenes from just ACOTAR for a second, because there's some really great scenes in this book. I love the scene with them swimming in the pool. It was so cute and romantic and just sparkly goodness. It was truly adorable. And I love how they're joking around with Lucian at the beginning, and she's like, oh yeah, the cereal told me that if I give you treats, I might be able to brush you, or something like that. And it's just so cute to see them kind of opening up and see Farah becoming a more open person. I thought Amarantha's trials were really cool. It was funny to kind of see the progression of like, okay, the first trial, she was just kind of like, oh yeah, this girl likes to hunt, so we'll give her something that no mortal could possibly kill. And then of course Farah is like, fuck your Midgard word, I killed it. And she's like, oh, okay. So then she goes after Farah's inability to read. And then finally she's like, you know what? Screw you. I'm going to make you kill the person you love. How about that? So I just thought that the progression of Amarantha's anger towards her, you could really see that in the trials. And I thought it was really funny. And the whole end scene was really well done too. Like, it was so cringy. Like, when she was breaking all of her bones, it was just like, why is this happening? And I just love how Tamlin doesn't even screw around. Like, there was no begging for mercy. He just kills her. He's like, nah, you done. You dead now. Like, no patience, no tolerance, just you're dead. The scene where they bring her back was just super wonderful. I was so excited, like, she's Faye, this is awesome. And that was one of the things that got me super hyped for Akamath, because I just love seeing her come back, and now she's going to get to experience Prythian from a whole nother angle. And I really wanted to see like how her sisters would react to that, because her sisters hate Faye as much as she did. Also, the scene with the cereal and the Naga, I thought that was really cool. I just thought that was a really great setup for like the kind of person she is. And scenes like that made it even harder for her to kill in the third trial, and kind of set up like how painful that was going to be for her and how much that was going to affect her going forward, because she obviously is a really kind-hearted person. She doesn't want to cause undue harm to creatures that don't deserve it. With that said though, her killing the Naga was really cool. That was such a great moment, and a great parallel to the wolf scene from Beauty and the Beast. Obviously Belle didn't kill any wolves, but Farah's slightly more badass than Belle, and she fucked those Naga up, and it was great. I also really liked the summer solstice party where she got drunk on fairy wine and was dancing, and Tamlin was playing his violin. That was just such a fun scene. I liked having those fun, carefree kind of scenes, especially considering how heavy the book gets at the end. I'm going to talk about some funny reread moments now, so I'm going to put the time here for you to skip ahead to, because all of the rereads are going to include mild spoilers for the next two books. So if you don't want to be spoiled for Akamath and Akawar, skip ahead to this time. Near the beginning, when Farah's going into market, somebody calls the children of the blessed fairy-loving whores, and I was just like, Farah's like, I couldn't help but agree, and I was like, really, Farah? Really? Also, the scene where she's in the library or study and looking at the tapestry of Prythian, and she looks at the north, which is the night court realm, and she's like, I knew to never ever go north. And I was just like, just you wait, Farah, just you wait. I also enjoyed referring to Amarantha as a sickness and a blight, because when you first read it, you kind of push that aside, you don't really think about it, but then once you've reread it, you're like, oh yeah, that blight is a fairy bitch queen. And kind of like I said earlier, I also just picked up a lot more on the things Tamlin said that set up for Akamath. Picking up on those little details really made Akamath a lot more believable, because when I first read Akamath, I was like, what the heck? Like, Tamlin just did a 180. It just seems so different from how he was. But then once you reread it, it's like, no, it was there the whole time, setting it up the whole time. There are a couple of things I didn't really love about this book. It's definitely my least favorite in the overall series, which doesn't mean I dislike it. I do love this book, but there are a couple of things I didn't really like. The first one is that stupid riddle. I'm not saying it's not a well-written riddle. It was very poetic, but it was so obvious that the answer was love. No offense if you didn't get it right away. Like, I'm a Ravenclaw, I'm pretty good at riddles, whatever, but literally as soon as I heard it, I was like, the answer is love, right? And I Googled it to make sure I was right, because I was like, that's so obvious. And then just the whole cheesiness of love being the answer, I was like, it makes sense for the story, but it's just kind of lame. Like, I don't know. I just thought it was a pretty obvious riddle that Farrah could have figured out pretty quickly. But obviously if she did, there'd be no plot for the end of the book. So, and considering that Farrah couldn't figure out that simple riddle, I thought the whole, like, Heart of Stone thing was really weird. Like, it just seemed kind of out of left field, and it was weird to me that she couldn't figure out this riddle, but she could remember these tiny scraps of conversation that I forgot over the course of the story, and suddenly come up with, oh, his heart is literally made of stone. Like, how did you do that? But you couldn't do the riddle. I don't understand. I think I kind of said this earlier, but I thought the first time I read it, it felt kind of slow. Like, the part where she's settling into life in the spring court was just kind of like, oh my god, like, when is the story gonna start? And obviously the second time around, I knew when the story was gonna start, so I was able to kind of enjoy those scenes a little bit more, but it did feel kind of slow-paced at first. Overall, I gave A Court of Thorns and Roses 4.5 out of 5 stars. There were definitely some strange plot choices, some weird pacing things, but as a whole, the story was very compelling, fluid, magical, thrilling. It was very much like an emotional roller coaster. I honestly haven't been this emotionally invested in a series since Harry Potter. I highly recommend this series to anyone that loves fantasy and magic and all of that kind of stuff. Alright guys, that is it for my book banter review of A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J. Maas. I hope you enjoyed this video and that you will let me know in the comments down below what you thought of the first book in the ACOTAR series. And if you did enjoy this video, I would appreciate it if you'd give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel, and I will see you next time. Bye!